right, folks, welcome to the broadcast. I'm newtmechanist, and tonight we are going to be continuing our little game development project. Still some bugs to correct from the prior stream, but we should get there soon. Then the next thing that we're going to look at is sort of the skeleton for getting the weaponry in the game, the attacks in the game. We've had kind of a very basic one that just appears automatically attached to the player, but that's not where we want to end up. Before we get too much further into that, though, let's check in with the kitties. We do have, let's see, 2 of them visible right now. We have Ember and Mason. This guy has been making mischief, but is currently placated with kibble. Can we see Sammy anywhere? Don't think so, and nor can we see Sherbet. Let's lock on here for now. So, when we last left off, one of the things we ran into was that the movement speed of some of the things that were tracking the player or just in general were breaking down, and that was because I did not have this. And this is essentially resetting the movement to nothing until we have an idea of where it should be moving, where we want it to be moving. Otherwise, the speed would just speed up and speed up. And that's not what we wanted. So we've got that resetting, but we still have another problem. And I'm just misinterpreting this, I think. So we're gonna this isn't something that we can actually do, but I'm just gonna break this apart into pieces and look at it. So this is the operative piece, and what's going wrong here is that it is backwards. Hey there, Done. Well, we have had a bit of a delay, but there have been intervening streams. So glad to have you back. Glad to have you back. Which side are you watching through? There we go. We're picking back up with our coding project. Quiet the music just a little bit. Okay, let's look at this. Let's look up this one here. Some other tabs. Clean up our workspace a little bit. Oh, it can't because it is all separated and it doesn't like that. I normally don't like to use this sort of patterning here. Jazz band concert, huh? Nice. No, I didn't want normalized. Move. Oh, there it is. They're moved toward 2 by a fixed delta. That's the thing. We have the body to move, and we have our target. So it should be moving in the right direction. Let's just put a 10 here to be sure. And then we're going to go into template for blobs, and we're going to make them pretty slow. We're debugging. So So blobs should be spawning around the edge of the screen. You can see them pop in a little bit now and again. Old guy's moving faster than I think he should be able to. Okay, yeah, they are moving directly away. Why are they moving away? So we have the vector, we call move towards, and we give it a target. And it should create a vector that is from our vector to our target. Was it? Let me take a look again, Tess. Now they're moving away. The ones that pop into existence on the left are starting to run to the left as well. Let me try to get to the right of one that is already moving right. Okay, no, once they're starting to move, they're not updating their movement, though. Their vector is staying. Yeah, once this one started moving right, it kept moving right. All right, this is more confounding than I thought. All right, let's look again. So we don't know what that is doing wrong. All right. Okay, so we declare a new vector 2 when we come in. We have received the blob. We use the player as the target. It doesn't care anything about anything other than the player target. Hey there, Sniper. It seems like there is some motion to them, but it's not nearly what I would expect. Especially not with how they're just moving away. Like, straight line. Target, we get a speed, we get a delta, and in... I have 5 cats, Sniper. It looks like Sammy has joined Mason over there on the bed. Sammy is the tuxedo cat at the top. There's our movement function here. Movement. Okay, if the player doesn't move, it's 0-0. So let's go in and let's spread this out. Why 5? Because there were 7, and 3 passed away, and I net adopted 1 more. So we declare the vector. Then we're going to set it to body to moved up position. And we're going to set it to towards. We're going to be needlessly verbose in order to be able to debug. So far I have found 5 is kind of at the limit of how much attention that I can give to them properly. It helps that most of them are active seekers of attention when they want it. I don't have an overabundance of cats that, like, are clingy. They're just very insistent when they do want the attention. All right, so this is our track player movement function, and what I've done is I've broken this one line effect down into a series of assignments instead of a daisy chain of function calls. I don't know which one is more efficient, but I find this method is way more readable, so we're going with this for the moment. It also makes it so I can line by line debug it. Okay. So our movement direction. Why is it 0, 0? Shouldn't be body to move's position. Okay, there we go. There we go. That was 0. That makes sense. It initializes to 0, 0. That is an option that you have, gamers. That is an option that you have. Subbing is always possible. I guess I should say subscribing for clarity. Okay, so then we wish I had a watch marker so that I could evaluate statements here. Yep, two cats visible there. Yeah, I guess 3. 2 cats visible. Since we got some folks popping in, let's see how many we can spot. Hey there, Lol. We currently can see 4 for sure. So we have Ember there, we have Sky up in the tree, we have Sammy and Mason on the bed. Is Sherbet in his little house? I think he might be. Zoom. Sort of. If you're watching on phone, it's not much of a zoom. Yeah, Sherbet's in there. You can just see his head by the little window in the back. He's napping and looking out the window. Hey there, Delta. Welcome. Welcome. We are resuming our game development project today. I'm doing some debugging. Okay. So the player is sitting at 0, 0 right now. And the creatures should have spawned elsewhere. So we have body to move dot direct to position is what it was set to. So movement direction is saying that the blob is like over here. Different account. We're making a survivor style game, so like Vampire Survivors, sometimes called Bullet Heavens, where you got swarms of critters coming from all sides and projectiles from you going everywhere. It's not about dodging projectiles, it's about putting out projectiles. We're still in the early stages of it. Today, I do want to get to the skeleton of the player's attacks. But we've got to fix this movement bug first. Not really like Castlevania. It's not like a side scroller or something like that. It's more of a top-down with stuff spraying around. Now, that said, Vampire Survivors does take a lot of visual inspiration from the original Castlevania games. We will not be doing that. Okay. So then it should be moving towards 0, 0. So it should have negative X and Y when I do this. Step. Nothing happened. Okay. We're going to make another adjustment to this function here. Not a Roblox game, but definitely different. So our current problem is that these blobs move away from us and then don't change direction going forward. Like, if the blobs are going to move away from us, they should be, like, these blobs should be running upwards, given the way that the function is broken. But they don't. They just keep moving in a straight line the way that they were moving, which is equally confounding. I hope that's getting updated. Well, thank you, Sniper. I appreciate it. Probably not, Guy. I'm not interested in Roblox. All right, we're going to store off a bunch of these as intermediary variables. It's a waste of space and allocation, but we're going to do it. Position is equal to body to move dot position. Now we should be able to do this because vector twos seem to be treated as simple types, just as like values. Hey there, Jose. Doing well, doing well. This will simplify some of the code anyway. So now what we can do... we can clean some of this up. So we don't need to have body to move. We can have body position like that. Then we can have target position here. A little more legible. Doesn't change a lot, but a little more legible. But yeah, we're doing well, Jose. We are doing well. And hey there, Ryan. If we get to a point where the game is finished and we feel good about it, then we would consider methods of making it available or publishing it. For now, we're still in the very, very, very early stages. We're not even an alpha yet. Early access would be a great deal of time in the future at the moment. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Okay. So then we normalize it. So this will tell us what each of these positions are. The useful thing about putting them in intermediary storage is I can see them now. Hey there, Lazy. Welcome, welcome. We're debugging our project here. We're trying to figure out why the blobs are running away. We are making a Vampire Survivors style game. A little current plans have it being a little bit of bioprototype. Minecraft has been through a lot. Okay, so we get these two sets. So we should have... Okay, this blob is in the upper left, and it's targeting 0, 0. So the movement direction that initially results from this should be 2 positive values in the vector. Like so. So movement direction is totally wrong. Yeah. Movement direction is going in the opposite direction that I want it to. So, for those following at home, hey there, Ethan. Body position is where the thing we want to move is. This is where the blob is. Target position is where the player is sitting, and the player always initially appears at 0, 0 on a grid, you know. So for the blob to move towards the player, it would have to increase its X and Y values. But what we're seeing is that movement direction is encompassing pretty much the entirety of the position. So there's something about this move towards that I'm not doing right. Do I watch Dreamy? I can't say I'm familiar, Mike. Can't say I'm familiar. Well, thank you, Lazy. I appreciate it. Big part of this series on our stream is both to do it. I've always wanted to poke at this kind of thing and just never sat down to do it. But additionally, it's learning a new programming language. I might be hiding something. That's impossible. Nanotypes don't hide anything. It's all on the up and up here. So yeah, this is the problem. We should be getting what amounts to target position minus body position. And I might just have to do that, period. Let's... I think this will be the way that we want it to go. So in a survivor style game, generally what you have is you have a bunch of timer based attacks. So like every second or so he throws a little magic wand bolt or something like that. And it's the frequency of the attacks, the damage of the attacks, and how they target that are a big part of the equation. So you might have a move that does a lot of damage, but it doesn't target anything. It just fires in a random direction. So it's powerful if it's landing hits, but you can't be certain that it's gonna. Or it's weaker, but it fires fast and it targets the closest thing. Those are generally the models for the kind of thing that works, and it's happening constantly. Would it be possible to have it turn-based? I could see something like that. It would be an interesting thought. It's not the way we're going, but I can't say for sure where we'll end up. Concepts change. Okay, so we're going to unpause briefly and let it drop back around. And we go through, we get our positions again. Same general concept. So now we hop down here, and our vector is now normalized. Okay, okay. We're still going in the wrong direction, though. Yeah, no, it's still wrong. It's still wrong. Oh, okay. It hasn't reloaded. I didn't need to move, but that doesn't really change the equation much. Okay. Normalize it. Yeah, that's looking promising. We've made the blobs really slow so we can kind of run at them. Okay. Hey there, Philip. Welcome, welcome. In some ways. So what we're seeing here is some very basic behavior from this kind of game. You have the player is locked in the middle of the camera, and you can move around. There's generally not a lot of boundary in the world, like you can keep moving. The trick is that the creatures keep spawning and keep generally converging on you. And if they touch you, and I haven't broken the impact physics, then you will take damage, and you will eventually lose. I'll have to figure out where I put that. But you can see that they'll swarm in, and it's only through the attacks that you get rid of them. Early on, when you're learning to play these games, a lot of it is learning the movement and what the different weapons do. The one on the pillow is Mason. This game is being coded in Godot engine, Vaporeon. It is one of the very, I would say, very accessible platforms. Okay, so we have a good model here. Little verbose, but it's also easy to read. I like that. Okay. So if we do target minus origin, then we should get what we need. Okay. Let's take a quick look at blob body here. So it's going to call hurt on whatever it collides with. So then if we go into the player script, there's our hurtable hurt. This should trigger as soon as I bump into him. But it does not. Okay. So we know where our general problem ends up being then. Oh. Okay, I think I see where our problem is. So previously, where was that living? It was living in movement template previously. Godot engine is Godot. So before we had movement template, and that has a signal collision happened. So we need collision happen to be in the movement object. So, and then we can emit the signal. So go into our movement template. This should all be a pass. Be this. Then we need to make sure in the spawner that it's connecting the right dots. I do recall you, Crazy. You have been in several of the past streams. And thanks, Don. Have a good day. Go into the spawner script. They're putting everything together. Going to say we're going to use this as kind of the structure that we're going to call. You take it out of here because each movement template isn't getting a collision. The movement as a whole is getting a collision effect. I'll see you later, Philip. And I appreciate the idea of needing to cool down after some time outside. Hey there, Salt. Welcome. Hey, come on, blobs. Right over to this blob and touch it. There we go, fixed. That is how it's spelled, Vaporeon. Okay, we have fixed basic collision. Okay, we've got that. So now, part of our question now is how to do the weapons. So let's see, what do I got here that I can use for illustrative purposes that isn't just me typing stuff? Oh well. Okay, so we have the idea of the player, and the player emits projectiles. And the projectiles are determined by which weapons you have, which things you have. Weapons have intervals of attack. Weapons have projectile types. Damage values. Well, weapons have projectiles. And projectiles have damage values. Have movement patterns. Projectiles have speed. Okay. So whatever the mechanism is, we want it to kind of attach to the player. That the person playing the game isn't firing projectiles. They are just moving the character out. There might be some exceptions to this, but the player doesn't control when the projectiles fire. They happen at intervals or have their own kind of special logic. The intervals in what the projectiles are determined by the weapon object, the kind of the ability that you unlock there. Once you have it, it starts firing on its own. About my old self, that's potentially that's a way to view what we've got. Because the prior product to the Catbot Corporation Nyanite is the Catbot Corporation Catbot, which we can see a chibi pixel version of right here. You can also see it in some of my old videos. Shameless plug, watch my old videos. I originally made this little critter for a mod for a game called Noida. That little pixel graphic, so some of them have carried forward. Okay, so we've got them moving. We've got the general idea here. So one thing we're going to need is akin to movement on a mob. We need to be able to attach a collection of weapons, and each weapon will fire. So if we look at the movement object, the movement object is something that is attached to the player. It's effectively like a collection of objects. So look in our spawner. When we instantiate a template, we just create a movement object and we populate it, and then we socket that into the creature. Yeah, it becomes a child of it. Movement itself is just a node. Just like pretty much everything else in the world, movement is a node. So it's just something we can glue to something else. So, not in movement. It's not really a behavior. It's projectile adjacent. It's spawner-like. Dystopian robot girlfriend. That, I swear I recall seeing a that sounds like a game or a visual novel title I've seen before, Dennis. The more practical why is because I'm cute and marketable. Very toyetic, as it were. Oh. Because it's a spawner, but it's not a spawner. Because it will emit a very particular projectile entity, not a templated one. Like we would create a variant of it. Because one of the things that we want is we want to be able to be able to modify projectiles during play. So the projectile weapon fires would change over time as you get other power-ups and the like. So it might start out as a little red bullet and end up as a, a large purple crescent kind of thing. And we want to be able to gracefully make that transition. So we need to be able to build it on the fly. Without having to construct it every single time. Constructing it every single time would be a hassle. So it needs to exist as it kind of needs to exist as a scene that we can modify. When we change it, we could rebuild it, but I don't want to have to build it every time a projectile is fired, because that'll be a lot of effort for the code to be cycling through. So question being, can I duplicate a node? Like, I could instantiate a generic projectile. I could make a generic projectile class and then go in and set things about it. Or I could instantiate a basic template for one. Like we've got... We may have to test this. So a special type of mob is a projectile, and we have... within projectiles, we have like the purple projectile, just defined as, it has this this scene is its body. It is this big purple bubble. Can I use that as a basis, but then have modifiers that I apply to it as the template that I will instantiate? So if we look at spawner, spawner has a mob to spawn template. And we instantiate that body. But can I don't want to mess with the template is the trick. I would need to make a new one. So there's one that's supplied, and then when I want to edit it, because if I touch this template, then all of them get updated. So if we go into mob body, I wonder if it would actually do this. Let's experiment. SCP, this is Godot engine. We're specifically using GD script, which is the scripting language specific to Godot engine. You can use C#. You could use like Visual Studio Code and make C# libraries for it. The workflow is very different in that scenario. I don't know if that would end up being a thing, 7th, but I mean, who knows where we'll end up. So mob body has the template instantiated there. What if we do spawn dot mob dot this is the body. We have an object. Can we mess with it here? Can't really mess with it. We would need to mess with the template. Thinking out loud here. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to go in and say, there's a I have this mob body, which is like a sprite. A lot of stuff wrapped around a sprite. I have movement templates. I want to be able to go in and mess with more of this. So what if we do this? This is experimental territory here. This is not what we intend to actually do. Mob to spawn. Not template speed 0 is equal to it's going to slow down, but we're going to change it in the template. If this does what we don't necessarily want it to do, then all of these bullets will slow down as time progresses. Well, all of the blobs will slow down. Each successive blob will become slower and slower and slower. If they don't all slow down, then we have something we could work with. Okay. So messing with this template isn't messing with a universal. Okay, we can work with this. Only at design time does messing with the template affect everything that uses that template. Okay. Hey there, Tiny. We are making a game. We're making a Survivor style game. So, players in the center. We're working on the data structure for weaponry, but critters converge from the edges and try to reach you, and if they reach you, they cause damage. This is going to be called Nyanite Survivors, just to go with the bizarre industry pattern of using a word and a name to invoke a prior game. But the Nyanite is the thing in the center. And dead. That is just a working title. Let's call it a project name. But it's on theme. Okay. So a spawner is a real simplistic entity at this point. I could probably come up with unique individual types for different things. We could take the spawner and have a variant or a wrapper for it that is a weapon. The weapon uses the spawner. It can change the spawn interval. It can change the template. And feed that spawner the template. So we might roll with that for now. So there is it's really kind of a scene. Is it? Spawner doesn't actually need a scene to go with it. Like a mob body does. But there's nothing that requires me to actually instantiate a spawner as a node. So why do we have that? Oh, okay, right. So a spawner is a node 2D. And the reason for that is so that it can have a point in space. It can move around. I wanted to see, and I completely forgot that I was going to do this, I wanted to see if I could remove the need for spawn position for spawners that are locked to the player. Now, there are spawners where we want to adjust their position. We want it to be able to target around it. So, like, the core mob spawner is special because I want it to... I want to adjust it, but ideally, we don't have to adjust this. So how would we go about doing it? Because what we could do is just move the spawner. Like, be a way to approach this. Okay, this is tangential, but it's relevant. So right now, what we do to spawn is that we will pop something into existence. And where do we set that spawn point? Here we go. We set its position. And that's what puts it on this. That's what puts it where we want it to be when we attach things together here. Where are we putting... here we go. When we do this, this puts the thing into the world, and it will appear at this position in the world. But this position is determined by this variable up here, which we've defaulted to 0, 0. It would be convenient if we had a way to have the spawner's position be manipulated differently. So I could have the spawner's position set by code logic here. So we could go into the game, and you can see right here, this is what we're doing to change the spawner's position. Miss Quackers, I'm sure I will have an opportunity to supply chat love to the kitties at some point. Right now, let's see here. All of them are in full nap mode. I think Sherbet is still in his little house, so all 5 of them are present and all 5 are snoozing. There is a good chance that the little black and white cat or the gray and stripy one will swing by for attention. And then we can tell them that folks have said hi. But until then, it's kitty nap time, as is commonly the case. All right. So what we're doing here with the spawn point is just in the game logic. We're taking the player position and just extrapolating the spawn point out. But what I could do is I could move the spawner's position based on this. I've replaced it to make sure that it shows up as a node 2D. But what I can also do is I want to put it here. So now it's centered on the player. So its 0 should be on the player. So I don't need to add this. I changed anything though. All right, we're gonna science this a little bit. Toggle comment. There we go. Equal to... to make it spawn to the right by 192 units. Okay, if this works, the blobs will always spawn off to the side. It doesn't like something. What's wrong? Did I define spawner? Spawner is defined. Does it not have to? Why does it not have a position? It's a node 2D. Node 2D should have positions. Why is what 2D? The game is 2D for simplicity's sake, since most of this is operating entirely on a flat plane. Paired with the fact that I'm using sprite graphics, it doesn't really need the z-axis. Now, there's nothing stopping me from eventually doing things like maybe doing some sort of 2.5D stuff. You know, the kind of thing you see in your Octopath Travelers and the like, where the game is still 2D, but it's presented in a fashion that gives the illusion of 3D. But one of the things I have found is that some of these games that do... some games in this nature suffer for attempting to have 3D in it because the visual readability of the screen is diminished. Why does a spawner not have a position? Yeah, as long as we keep everything on like a very defined flat plane, we could then do like some tilting or something like that to give you sort of like a pseudo 3D, which could have a nice look. Let's say side. Side, we're making a game. We're making a Survivor style game. Right now, what we're trying to do is get the spawner logic a little cleaner. Methods do I have for spawner? Oh, I think I have an idea. Spawner is a spawner. Spawners extend node 2D. I mean, a nice thing about that side is that it's learning programming, so you can kind of learn as you go. And if you already have some basis for programming knowledge, then it still gives you a leg up with that kind of thing. Self dot. X is a node 2D. X dot. Okay, node 2Ds have positions. Spawner extends node 2D. Spawners are node 2D. But maybe I have to use its transform. Hey there, spectator. We are still working on the game. Okay. So if I go into my game behavior, my game scene, into... Oh, we're going to have to fix that. That's always gross every time I see it. Let me just hide that. We've got movement. We've got the new and improved movement logic in, and we fixed some of the problems with it. Not everything, but some of it. Some of it just needs to be cleaned up and gotten, we need to get around to that part. The thing that we're currently working on is the infrastructure for building the weaponry, which is critical to this kind of game. But again, we've got to get the infrastructure in there. The corresponding objects. So one of the things we're trying to do is get the... Why does it not have position? A Survivor-style game side. So monsters swarm in from the edge of the screen, and you fire out waves of bullets to knock them out. You get XP points through various means, and like treasure boxes on the map, and then you get upgrades. You get upgrades, your weapons become bigger and more powerful, and ideally you continue to dodge monsters and wipe them out at a rate that exceeds the rate at which they approach you. Continue for some arbitrary amount of time or until you lose. Node 2Ds have a position. They have a vector too. So, yes, exactly like that. It's the game that essentially made the genre solidified. Okay. What about this? Let me get away with that. Oh, dear. Wait, spawner is fully a null. Why is spawner a null? That's not right. Well, there would be our problem. Do. There we go. Addressed. Well, this we have to be careful of. When I'm dealing with coordinates, I also need to remember that I'm... Oh, okay, no. There is grid space, and then there is world space. I need to be careful not to use vector 2i's when I don't mean it. But where is my ready function? There we go. Wait, no, spawner should be populated. Over to the game scene. Game has... Okay, when I changed the spawner object, I deallocated it. Oh. And spawner has a mob to spawn, which is the blob. By deleting the object, I threw off a couple of variables. And it will use packed scene, isn't it? Template. There we go. Oh, they're hurting each other. Oops. Okay, but it is not moving with me. It's not moving with me. Let's make sure that the blob body is colliding with the right stuff. Oh, okay, we have a problem. We don't care about a collision that happens, like we don't hurt other enemies. But right now, we're on another tangent. If I look, in the blob's body, it says if I get hurt, I just go away. And in collision happened, it says, is this hurtable? If it's hurtable, apply damage to it. Well, call hurt on it. So the blobs bump into each other, they go away immediately. But, well, I wonder if... Collider... Is there something about the layer that it collided on? Let's look up that symbol. Doesn't look like it. So what we would want here is we'd want to be able to say which mask it bumped into. So if you look at this right here in the inspector, we have collision layers and collision masks. The mask will say, I am looking at these layers to see if I bump into something. Like it cares about walls, it cares about bumping into another enemy because we want it to like we don't want them to pass through each other, but we don't want them to hurt each other is the problem. So that's why we're looking at this to see, can I get the mask layer that it is bumping into? But it looks like we're just getting the physics layer. Which is less ideal. if we look in the script layer in the blobs code, does this return? Type of object. That doesn't help. We could add an interface to it. We could also add a source to the attack, but that still doesn't help because we would need to be able to differentiate the source as a mob or not. We could pass a type on the attack, and during hurtable we could ignore it. So the blobs emit like enemy contact type of attack, which sadly we're going to have to use an int to define. But yeah. And we'll set default damage to, be monster type. So, did an enum elsewhere. Or did I do an enum elsewhere? That's the trick side. We don't know that it was with another mob or with the player. We just know that it bumped into something. In the case of another blob, it bumps into it and says, "Oh, a collision happened." When that collision happens, what we're trying to do now is determine, was that with the player or not? The player can care because the player will receive a hurt message from the blob, but so will another blob. So if two blobs bump into each other right now, they're killing each other. And that's not what we want. And blobs have to be able to collide with each other or else they'll overlap. Where did I put that other one? Oh, it's in the globals. Mob pool type. Okay. So by doing this, we don't have to check if they're a mob or a player or something like that. Is it really a damage type? Oof. This is a bit of a hassle still, because we would want to have two things. It's a source type. Yeah. We could probably just do source type. I don't feel a need to put in, like, it's fire damage kind of thing. I have played games where you try to do that and it gets messy quick. Because it's neat to apply traits on that level, but I don't know that we want to deal with that. So we could have enemy is equal to 0, player equal to 1. I don't know that we're going to use these values, but we can say it's a damage source type, which is effectively an int. By default, it's enemy. Oh. Sadly, we can't use this anywhere else. It's a local enum. It's a limitation of Godot engine. I could add functions elsewhere, but they still amount to an int. Like in globals, I could have, give me a value type, but I would still be passing like an int to them, or I would have a bunch of individual functions. Like, get damage source type enemy function. Not out of the question, maybe later. So then in blob body, no, we need to go to the interface for a for hurtable. To be 0. We'll go into each one of the scripts. It's not ideal, but it's our hurtable hurt. Here we go. Oh, no, we don't need to do that. What am I doing? Hey there, Sherry. We're back to coding. We're back to coding. What did we call it? I forget what we called it. Type. Zero. Okay, so collision happened if type 1. Then we tell the mob to go away. Okay. Let's see what breaks. Okay, the blobs are no longer popping each other. Good. I'm not thrilled with the solution, but now we have a distinction between player and enemy damage. So that in the collision or in the hurt function, we have a differentiation. Like I said, I'm not thrilled with that, because that means every mob has to check and say, is it player damage? What it does allow, though, is for like environmental hazards and the like. So the ground gets lit on fire. Is it considered player damage? Is it an environmental effect? Not sure. I don't like this, is what I'm getting at. I don't like having in the hurt function that this is true. It does kind of look like that, doesn't it, Side Night? Okay, so one of the things we learned is that spawner is not moving with the player. I would have to put this spawner in the player object, I think, for it to move with the player. That's weird, though, because this moves with the player. Here's our game code. Okay. Game. There. So during process, physics process, we have an angle. Okay, spawner is... I am Sunfish, I am. What we're doing right now is we're seeing if I can make the spawners a little more flexible as far as where they come from. So far, the answer is no. I'm doing this because I want to be able to have spawners for the attacks from the player originate from the player without having to constantly update where they're spawning from. So far, it looks like that's not going to work. You can see the blobs are always spawning from that kind of one square down from that central red one. What I'd like is that if it did what I wanted, they would spawn 2 squares down from where the player is standing. This right here. So every time physics updates, I'm setting the spawn position equal to where it is 2 squares down. 96 is about a square. This is unfortunate. How to fix, what to do. Well, what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick little break, and I will be right back. And then we're going to get back to this. Settling back in, we'll be starting in just a moment. Yeah, it's what I was hoping to do, Side, is not have this logic here. Like, in this spot. Right now, the game object is determining where this spawner should spawn. I don't know that we can really avoid that, though. Okay. So what we're going to do... Gonna clean this up a bit. That. All right, that should put it back where it was. You had the weirdest dream, Kebo. So what this will do is say, like, okay, yeah. So this uses the player position. Oh. Let's clean this up. Nodes dot player. I'm removing a local instance. In making sure that all of the actual references to the player object goes through global nodes. Hey there, Stacy. Welcome, welcome. Like, I don't mind this part, but I want to make sure that anytime I am referencing something that is meant to be a global object, that I go through the global for consistency. So not everything knows about these. So these are for loading into the global. Like, all of these are for loading into the global, except this one and this one. We are working on our game again. Okay. So the spawner should be back to tracking the player and emitting the blobs from the sides of the screen. What happens is it randomly generates a float from 0 to 360, uses that angle, and spawns them 1,000 units off the screen. Ideally, what I would do is say, it'd be a little over 960. Let's do that. So the game logic in the spawner would be 1,056. That'll put them off the screen when they spawn. Okay. All right, so we're spawning again. So back to our weapon logic. First, we want to have a wrapper for a spawner. Spawners don't need to be physical nodes anymore. Let's correct that. Spawner extends node. Spawner code. We're going to change the type to just a node. It is an entity. It doesn't need space. Then in the game, we're going to change your node type to a node. I could have this be a packed scene, and I might need to do that later. It should still work. Yep, okay. You can see there, they appear and walk off, so one square past this is where they spawn. So they're spawning well off the screen when it's vertical space. I could come up with a way to convert it into squares so that they always spawn one square out from the limit, but I don't think we need to just yet. Okay, so now we're going to go into our spawners, and we're going to add a script that is a weapon spawner. Okay, and weapon spawners are different in that... I might be able to get rid of that. But they're different in that they have a particular projectile template that they start with, and then they mess with it over time. So the spawner gets its template replaced on a regular basis. So this extends spawner. And it will... We're going to go in and we're going to change some of this stuff in spawner. So this is a fixed entity. And what we'll do is we'll call into that, and then it will call some of it, the rest of its function, and then it will do this. No, it might need to call this multiple times. Or daisy chain them such that this gets called several times. Okay, so we have a function get second slices. We'll do delta. All right, SCP. Thanks for joining us, and have a good rest of your day. We'll pass on that. What that will do. Seconds passed, and it will return second slices. So anytime we call this, it will update seconds past. Okay. Well, I infer that the 180 bench part is a weightlifting thing. I am not familiar with the second part, the rope part. Get second slices if that's greater than 0. Then we're going to have I think we can still do that. Self-imposed reincarnation. Tricky. Bit of beverage here before I forget again. Drinky drink. So I could make this an array, handle an array, where it goes through and it takes a series of mob bodies and it instantiates them. So it says attach them to, or attach the movement to them. Okay, no, it's the global node.add mob part is the repeated part. We'll always do that for every mob. Not yet, Lunar, not yet. For those that can't see who I'm chatting to, there are 3 streams going on right now. Make sure that all of them are coming through. Yep. And yep. There are 3 streams going on. There are 2 different YouTube streams and a Twitch stream. So it's possible that I'm talking to somebody you can't see in the stream. What I am attempting to do right now is in the spawner processing, make it so that there are enough existing functions that a weapon spawner can override the relevant pieces. I think these 2 parts, this part isn't certain. In fact, I want to leave this part to be, so we're gonna move you up a moment. Okay, so the idea of I need to spawn a mob body and get its movement template set up, this is overridable. I would think a Nano event Lunar would be a way to end the run. Whether that's good or bad yet, I don't know. But it might also just be a intrinsic part of the run end. How that is triggered and what that does, I don't know yet. We're not really to that point quite yet. Okay, so this whole part should be in a function, and then we should get to event. This whole part is a separate function, where we essentially say this is how we spawn the mob body. Then there can also be something where we mess with the template. Yeah. Pretty much there, Lunar, pretty much. There are a lot of opportunities for Noida callbacks, I think. Okay. Yeah, okay. Hey there, Riley. Welcome, welcome. We are working on our spawning logic so that we can add weapons into our game. Just take this whole mess, right? Welcome back, Kebo. Okay, this is the one that I'm going to override. And what it'll do is it's going to return, it's going to create a bodies is a array of, spelled correctly, mob bodies. What do you mean? Oh, okay. We'll fix that in a moment. Not a lot of disappointment, Kebo. We fixed our movement glitch. So we've got the blobs converging again. We've also fixed a glitch with how damage happens. We didn't want the blobs killing each other. And if I didn't already thank you, Chase, hopefully the good work continues. And now we're working on a wrapper for spawners. A subclass, essentially, that will override some of the methods that spawners use. It's going to call create mob bodies. Going to have another variable bodies, which is an array of mob body. Mob bodies is equal to mob bodies. Or mob body in mob bodies and mob to spawn, mob pool type, mob body. Okay. So what this allows us to do is we can mess with, in a child class, we can mess with how time is processed. We can also mess with how we generate the mob bodies. So each weapon spawner is able to do this. So we can create individual weapon spawners. I would not mind if we create an object to handle this as well. There is potentially some hassle. We need to pass the mob to spawn along. But I think that will still work. Yeah. So we might create a sub-object that is the weapon that handles this. But ultimately, a weapon spawner will have special logic for messing with the template. So that's going to be where I think the sub-objects come in, is that the weapon spawner will have extra objects attached to it that sort of chain out and mess with the object. So it might be, there's one that changes the number of them. It changes their spawn direction. It changes their movement types, that kind of thing. With the mob to spawn being the first thing that it does. So first we're going to get the mob to spawn working, the default. So in theory, this will still allow it to spawn blobs. Or it'll explode. Let's find out. it'll explode because I did this function wrong. And body. Learn bodies. There they are. Remarkably small number of blobs going on here. Oh, there they are. And we still get our collision logic wired up. We still have our movement logic wired up. Okay. So, because Spawner defines these functions and operates in this flow, where it says get the slices, and if the slices are greater than 0, get a list of mob bodies to create, and then create them. And this determines position, movement, all of that. If we override this in Weapon Spawner, we're able to change the logic of everything that we spawn. So then in Weapon Spawner, which extends Spawner, we just need to do this. So we've created an override on our interface. We've created an override in our child class. Does my PC make carpet? I was not aware of that as a standard computer function. Think about it. I don't remember Scratch. I don't think I've ever heard of that tool. Do you mean like my body? Is there an actual fur involved? Because most of this is like soft fiber optics. That's how you get the neat little blue tinge. For a while, one of my cats, a pair of my cats, were Maine Coons. And one of the things about Maine Coons is their fur is used when testing the pet vacuums to determine how good they are. Because Maine Coon fur will felt up something fierce. As in, if you rub it together, it will bind together into like a hard ball. No, just the hair and like ear tufts are like fiber optics. Not really. They're not really fiber optics, but they have similar principles. One of these times, maybe I'll get it rigged up so they can change to a color other than blue. All of the circuitry is part of the nanotube network in there. That's why it's all blue and pink. See, let's see. It's all tubes. Tubes. Okay, so in a weapon spawner, we have this same we have the same logic that we can do. Yeah, my PCs are moved into an area that's segregated from where the cats are. So I just have to worry about your standard dust accumulation. Prior to that, I still had good airflow protection, so generally the cat fur didn't get into the fans. All right. Weapon spawner as it is needs some extra variables here. This is where I think the modifiers come into play. Either is it Noba or Naba? Either way, welcome. For now, it's going to be an array of type object. Okay, it's an array of type int. So the idea here is it will still use the default logic, but we've added this export from modifiers for the time being. Ultimately, now that I'm looking at it, we're still not a special spawner. We could incorporate this into monsters too, into just a generic spawner. Yeah. Yeah. Simplification. So then we need the idea of like long O, like no. Ah, okay. Noba it is. For those just joining us, we are working on a game project. Should get blobs coming in from the sides shortly. Actually, let's get them moving faster again. Our base spawner, we're going to move you back up to game layer. Sure, our game object still has spawner attached. Go into the blob template. And we set its speed to 96. That must have been unpleasant, Yippee. And hello, Levi. Welcome back. Good to see you again. I think there's a lot of charm to 2D graphics. I like the kind of extra detail we can do with modern 2D. Is that not coming through? It is indeed 4 months there, Levi. For whatever reason, my logic isn't showing, my scripting logic for chat isn't showing anniversaries. I might have to fix that. They're still substantially slower than they're supposed to be. Oh, okay. It probably hadn't updated yet. Come on, blobs. There we go. Look at him go. Neum. The pixel art we're using is actually really chunky. It's derived from a game called Noida that generally had a 16 to 32 sized pixel palette. Well, not palette, size. A lot of the creatures were like 16 by 32. Hey there, Fraggy. Welcome, welcome. Let's get them about the same speed. So we actually have time. Okay, so a weapon spawner doesn't need to be special here. What we can do is we can apply modifiers in sequence to anything that spawns. With create mob bodies, we can add additional ones if modifiers say use more. Well, thanks, Fraggy. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I like how it turned out, too. Excuse me if I kind of jam out periodically to the music. I like it. Vibing, as it were, for those that are using a more modern parlance. Okay. So what if... Yeah, we could add a bunch of variables to these. We could also reference the player entity, and the player could have those variables. So, like plus projectiles, that kind of stuff could be derived from the player as well. We're not going to worry about that for now. Instead, we're going to start thinking about spawn modifiers. So what we'll do, my thought here is number of them needs to happen as part of a loop. Now, so I want the ability to add multiple of them. I want the ability to add something like a spread. So if it spawns like 3 of them, that it's possible for me to make it so that those 3 fan out, instead of just having them be 3 stacked on top of each other. I'd like to be able to spawn them in sequence, like 1, 2, 3, kind of like a little bursty deal. It can sometimes feel that way, Kevo. Especially in text, sometimes after writing it, you look at it and realize you didn't convey what you were really thinking to do. All right, well, let's see if we can find some other cat. Man, I still don't know if Sherbet is visible. Let me see if he's there. Pushing buttons. Oh, he's hiding out. So one possibility is that he's on the bed cam here, but he's off to the side. Sometimes they're kind of up and right from where Sammy is. Technically, that's up and left. The camera is reversed because it's also upside down. Sometimes he's up in the tree, the sky, but he's not there. Let's look at tree 2 again, just to be sure. Well, Sky heard something. Yeah. The backboard of the bed you can actually see there, which is a recent addition. Sometimes they sit on that and look through the windows now. Is he there? Nope, not there. Okay. So let's think through this. So we iterate for count. We can mess with position here. So we generate a bunch of them. Then once they're generated, we can go through and change the positions as well. Alternately, we could change the position in here. Inside the loop where we're creating them. Where we would say, okay, you're the third one, your position is this. So movement is already handled in the mob to spawn template, but no, that's the default movement. So we can have things that change the count. So I'm going to create multiple of them. We could have things that change the position. So if we look at like vampire survivors and things that are using that as inspiration, the orbiting things. So like the Bibles in vampire survivors, the alchemist orbs in Halls of Torment, those kind of things where you have some number of projectiles orbiting, having them with different positions could be relevant. So we can have a bunch of different types of modifiers to apply. And they don't necessarily apply in a special order aside from first we generate a number of them, then we mess with their position. We mess with their movement, and then we mess with their position. Words that start with T. I mean, it's kind of a grab bag. There's plenty of them, but I think like a lot of folks, when you're on the spot to think of one, they escape you. Okay, so in this segment, we set our default movement. So this loads up our default movement sequence. Then so we're generating X of them. And then in each one of them, we go through and we mess with their movement. then once we've got an individual with its movement, that is an opportunity for us to mess with its position. Like where it is in relation to the other things. This is kind of tricky. Because this is only the starting position. Something that orbits. Well, no, this is just when it starts. This is just when it starts. So messing with their position at this point. So I have 5 of them and I want to array them in a circle. This is when you do that. Hey there, Sherbet. Hey, bud. He has come to join me. He hasn't been on camera fully, so let's pop him in there. He's very fuzzy. Got like short, soft fur that isn't like laying down. It kind of sticks up. He's got kind of a cotton ball kind of thing going. I don't know that that would necessarily be limited to like a serial killer. There's people just being edgy. I could suspect medical professionals might be into the actual heart when they're referring to a heart versus the cartoonish heart, which could be used for like sign of affection or similar. Generally, one doesn't use an image of an excised organ as a sign of affection. Or a symbol thereof. So I guess if it's like a post-mortem promised transplant organ. Like some sort of thing willed to another person. If they should survive, here's a spare heart. But there's a real time limit on that. Our transplant technology is not so advanced that you can just, keep it in the fridge. Okay, so it's not modifiers. It's... we have count modifiers. Yeah, I think I want them to be separate types of modifier. Because if it's a big blob of them, I still have to split them apart. So I think predetermining a type and socketing that into it is still reasonable. Because then we know when to apply it. Adding another count after I have added the first one and started to, like, if the first one is a movement a movement modifier, then I don't know that the count happens until I get to a point where the movement modifier can be applied. Like, I could go in and pop it into the template as soon as I've got it. Like, we could apply modifiers here, but I think... And there is legitimately research on that front, Kebo. There's a lot of interesting things people are doing with essentially lab-grown organs. It could be quite a while, Noba. Now, when it will be in a play-testable state of some kind, that's going to be an iterative process. Is once I get it into a playable form, I'm probably going to make it available in some fashion. I don't know what group of people I will make it available to. It might be a members and patrons thing to start with. Eventually, it would be opened to a wider audience onto something like the Discord as we approach kind of alpha and beta states, and we need a bigger group to look at it. And then there might be iterative loops on that where it's, the playtesting finds lots of flaws or it's just not cool anymore. Hey there, Tangerine. Welcome. Welcome to our little game dev stream. I think types of modifier is still viable. And hello, Green. Welcome. Glad that you can join us. Yeah. Okay, so we have 3 actual types of modifier right now. Count modifiers. I could have just moved them around, but Position modifiers and movement modifiers. They will not be arrays of ints. They will be arrays of specific types of object. So a count modifier happens first, and that iterates the whole process. Then we have position modifiers, which happen at the end once we have created all of them. We iterate over them again and apply a logic on top of that. Those are going to be some of the more complicated ones. With a movement modifier, that's largely determined right away. So I just go over it, and once I've created the initial movement, I add all of the additional ones in sequence. So just go over that, stick new movements to them. Position modifiers, then, after we have created them and we have attached their movement to them, we go over the whole list of them that we have created, and we apply the position modifiers, because the position modifiers care about the collection. I mean, brain tissue is kind of squish, so I don't think you would have to scoop too terribly hard. You'd probably want something sharper than your standard ice cream scoop. Just because I suspect there's a fibery nature at some point, so you want to sever that. Now, I don't think it would, it would be as if something that you would normally scoop. Not like a paste or a butter. More of like wiggly bits. Wiggly. Okay. So by default, we're going to default count to 1. Count as an int is equal to 1. define the variables. We instantiate the movement object. We set the body to move, and we connect its function. These are all things that we do steadily. The mob body happens within each one of these mob bodies we always need. We're going to be adding to that. So or I in count is not going to be a global or a member variable. Count. Oh wow, I messed that whole typing up. Count as int to 1. So then we modify count. Iterate for count. Hey there, Brianna. Welcome to the broadcast. We're doing some game development. Pressing some buttons. There we go. Buttons pressed. I am not Italian. I in count. Do the thing. The movement, and then we have add the mob body to the collection here. See here. I don't like traditional iterators, but we're going to use them. You know, I, J, K, that kind of thing. Nested enough, they can start to be vague. So position. So then we say or mob body in mob bodies. Apply position modifiers. All right, so the blobs should still spawn. That would be a very convenient talent, Kebo. Much more convenient than lead, I would suppose. Though there's still that Philosopher's Stone to deal with. Okay, blobs are still appearing. Blobs are still functional. Good, good. Then if we look at a mob template, So a movement modifier would have a movement template and a speed to go with it. A count modifier would just be a number, +1. A position modifier is trickier because it's going to iterate over the whole collection and mess with it. You're also going to get nested modifiers. So one of the classics is a spread shot. So instead of firing one, I fire more shots, but they're widened out into a cone instead of a straight line. So potentially like losing focus but gaining area. That's going to iterate over all of them and create that initial cone effect. And generally you would apply a straight line movement to them, but you would change the facing. You would change the angle for each one. Yeah. That's still tricky, though. That's still tricky. I don't know that our existing pattern accounts for direction. No, we could still do that. We could still accomplish that. Yeah, diamonds are an enforced rarity thing. It's controlling the commodity both through having control over the availability of them, but additionally the PR surrounding them. They're not actually rare or special. There's a group out there enforcing their rarity and their specialness. And even then, there's extra layers to that, both counterfeiting, all kinds of stuff. Is it Levi's birthday? If so, happy birthday, Levi. And also, hello, Din. Yeah, yeah. Thinking on something here. So in the spawner, there are modifiers to it. Levy, I have definitely heard before. Also Levi. And then, of course, you have the manufacturer of jean pants. Blue jean pants, usually, but jean pants, Levi's. Not possessive, seemingly plural. Okay, so this is a rendered down modifier set. I think when they are coming in, when we are going to apply them, like when you're selecting a modifier in the game, it's not going to be as a count modifier or as a position modifier. It is as a bundle, like increase count by 1, spread shot kind of thing. And then we render it into the relevant pieces. Yeah. So what we'd want is a series of movement types that we can then start applying, as well as count modifiers. So if we make a spawner, I have YouTube monetization, Kebo. I do not intend to put monetization into the game if I can help it. Aside from perhaps a very nominal fee to obtain. Ember has come for pets. So I can make a type. I can make a series of types that are modifiers. Count modifiers are easy. They're just a number. Movement or position modifiers are more complicated. Those are full-on objects. Is that Cesar there? If you mean in the background of a stream, that would be very straightforward. Adding like a little ad bar, you know? There are plenty of platforms that inflict that on you. In a game, it's pretty straightforward. That's one of the things that the Unity engine is kind of known for, is there's a baked-in feature for having monetization like advertisements and the like wired into the game through Unity servers. So they get a cut and you get a cut kind of thing. It's not an insignificant fashion of the kind of things that people don't like Unity for. Okay, so count modifiers can be an array of ints. That makes sense to me. Position modifiers need to be an array of objects that take in an array of mob bodies and change its positions. So this is an object. Movement modifiers is kind of a pair. We could get away with it being like a hash or a dictionary. But I feel like there's too much of a risk of collision. Another thing that I haven't resolved that we would need to is the idea of bounding speed. to be able to add a movement modifier without accelerating the projectile. If we look at movement, where did I hide that? Behaviors, movement. So in movement, it iterates over each mover, and each mover is going to mess with the vector. The vector, though, the velocity, like that whole thing includes the speed. So each mover can change the speed. And right now they each influence it by their multiplier. So one possibility is separating the projectile speed from the speed of each movement portion. So, for example, if we look at the purple projectile, the purple projectiles template, it does to a random monster at a speed of 96. So we could make it so this isn't the actual speed of the projectile. This is the weight given to the to random mob movement. So then what we could do is we go over the entire iteration of movement patterns, apply that to the vector, then we normalize that vector down to 1 and multiply it by the actual speed of the projectile. What that would do is it would still make it so that the projectile has a total speed, but that the individual movements are bounded. I'm kind of torn on that. I think it's more plausible to do, because otherwise we have to be able to modify each individual one to make that meaningful. I'm sorry. To make a difference in speed meaningful. Like if I'm modifying speed of projectiles, or I'm adding movement to each projectile, the projectile intrinsically speeds up because we're messing with the vector each time. So if this one has a speed of 1, and then I add a movement, another piece of movement with a speed of 1, I could end up with a speed of 2, or they could conflict with each other. So if we have a global speed modifier, we would have to affect each one. Well, for now, let's keep the individual speed modifiers. Which means whenever we do a movement modifier, it includes a speed modifier. Let's look at our movement template here. Okay, yep. So the intrinsic movement will be set in the same way that the movement modifiers are set, is it's a pair, a paired set of arrays. Okay. So counts are just ints. Positions are a thing in and of itself. So I need to create the position modifier object. then a movement modifier is it's a movement template. So we do the same thing that we do with movement, is that we have an array of movement templates and an array of ints. Okay. Then we need a position modifier. We're going to add modifiers. So, let's see. It would be useful to it would be useful to be able to get a full night of sleep, Kebo. I appreciate that sentiment. Position modifiers. If I wanted to do a spread, we still need a directional vector to movement. Because let's say it was a triangle spread, it doesn't help us if that like a basic cone spread if we don't know the initial direction. Okay, that got trickier. That just got trickier. We would need to be able to have a first shot at the vector. So one possibility would be that we go into each projectile and have it move by a fraction of a second. And what that should do is give us a vector. There will be some sort of movement that happens. And from that vector, we now have the basis of movement. We now have the basis of projectile adjustment. So it could be like a single frame of movement happens as soon as it spawns. How to do. Oh, we can. We can. So a movement entity could have physics process. We could wrap this. We can wrap this. Don't know that I like the method name move, but so we can call move from outside with delta. And this is fractions of a second. So then if I call into mover, we add a child, and then we call movement dot move with 0. Let's see, that would be 6 frames at 60 frames per second. Less than a frame. There. It's a very small amount of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to temporarily go into our game logic. And we're just going to say, so 10 squares would be 960, 864. They should appear on screen. They will perform a single move when they do. Okay, there is no visible effect. Okay, good. So this is a bit of a hack. This movement.move portion. What this will do, though, is that the mob body has a vector now. It has a velocity now. Because it has a velocity, when we go through and we iterate over for position, we can do that sort of like mess with the cone kind of thing. Hey there, Gregors, welcome. We've still got a little bit of time to go, so you're ready to go. Still not great. Still not great. Because if we do this and say I have a move away from player is the movement, because I want the spread to continue in a straight line from the player. As soon as I have done this, what a straight line from the player constitutes is defined. Which means the spread won't influence that. I don't like that. We could clear targets. Let's look at a mover. So if we look at movement, what it's doing is saying, if I know it's a mover, move it. So we have the concept of a mover. If we look at a movement template here, let's say track player movement, when it comes in, it says my target is the player. This isn't the one we care about. Let's say 2 random mob. So it's going to say it's mob target. It's moving towards it, but it only gets it once. Its movement direction is only once. So if I clear targets, this one would reset it to 0. I mean, a party is a party, even if it's a small number of people there, Keats. And thanks, Million. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. So we can add another method to mover that is clear target. And if its target is cleared, what's going to happen is that the initial movement will assess what it's... but it could randomize again. Issues. Oh. How we gonna do? How we gonna do? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I guess bonus. If you want everybody to get together, it might be easier for scheduling purposes, so you don't risk a conflict. Okay, so this one, I think this is going to be a roadblock for us at the moment. We need a way to change the positioning so that we can get movement that is, again, like a spread shot, like the idea of a cone of projectiles when we adjust it. But in doing so, we need to influence any sort of straight line movement. We need the idea of facing so that we can rotate the vector a little bit. Oh, I think we can do that. So what if position modifiers will also look at the angle of the vector, and then when they're doing things like creating a spread shot, they rotate that vector out. We've already got vector rotation logic in place here, so yeah, tracking cursor is pretty straightforward, assuming I can get the cursor's position on the screen and translate that into world coordinates, which should be a possibility. Kebo, there are some cats that are allergy friendly. It's a matter of doing some research on them, since it's generally like they're the dander of them. I don't know if it's true, but one of them was Maine Coons are supposedly less allergenic. I would assume Sphinx cats have a different impact on allergies. I misread that, Lunar. It's tracking the cursor would be possible, but I don't need to track the cursor as far as what I'm thinking. So a spread shot, the question was, how could we do a spread shot? How could we take a multiplier and say, okay, we take all of your projectiles and we turn them into a fan instead of a blob of projectiles. When you're turning them into a fan, the initial movement would be expected to like fan out like that. Let's say the projectile normally is a straight line. If it's a cone, then you'd expect some of those projectiles to deviate from the straight line. Yeah, kind of a blunderbuss effect there, Kebo. When I was just thinking of a position modifier as a point that it moves it to, that's not quite right. It's as much it is a vector rotation or change. Whether that is to push the vector out so that starting position changes a bit, or that we alter the vector so that it moves in a different direction. So I could do things like the projectile aims straight up no matter what other modifier you do. Like some of those really terrible Noida projectile modifiers, the really bad ones. Sea of Thieves had some potential. I don't like any game that has enforced or forced potential adversarial scenarios with other players on the internet, because inevitably, if you have a circumstance where if a player decides to become aggressive against you, and that is unavoidable, then inevitably there will be a player that does that. And their goal when they do it is to hurt you. It is not to win the game or to steal your treasure. It is to inconvenience you in some fashion. If it's a streamer, they will get in there and they'll start like screaming racial slurs or something. If it's if you're just trying to complete a quest, they will run in and like try to disrupt the quest. It is fundamental. Hey, Sherbet. Sleepy stretch. Sleepy stretch. Okay. So position modifiers need to be robust. They change a vector. They change position and vector. Now, there are games where if you don't play them steadily, you will lose some of like the knowledge of how to play that, whether it is systemic knowledge, like the nuances of a RPG's combat system, or it is the muscle memory necessary for something like intricate platforming and the like. Those are things that can get rusty, but they can also be reobtained with practice. It comes down to, do you have the motivation and the time to do it? Just like learning programming. If you want to do it and you have the time to do it, then get out there and do it. Okay, so we need an object for this one. The generic position modifier is a class name of position modifier so that we can extend it. Delay of typing. Sherbet has decided now is pet's time, so he is up behind my head on my chair rest. The headrest on my chair. And what he'll do is he'll initially sit up there until I start scratching his back, and then he'll kind of flop on his side, resting his back against my neck and the rest of his body kind of on my shoulders. That's why I'm kind of slouched forward a bit. He is toasty warm and he is purring away. And my wrists and hands are getting tired. There we go. All right. So we will have to continue this here tomorrow. I do plan on having a stream tomorrow, barring unforeseen circumstances, appointment-wise, schedule-wise, or mental health-wise. We'll see. but it is planned tomorrow. We're going to continue this. What we want to do is get position modifiers codified, as well as movement modifier templates codified, so that we can apply them. Movement modifiers should be straightforward, but position modifiers in particular, I want to do that, and I want to get some basic models in place. So we'll see how it goes. I'll just need to set up a basic assumed interface for these, and we'll go from there. But in any event, folks, thanks for joining me today. I hope you had a good time coding with us. We made some progress, we fixed some stuff, and we've got the start of the weapon system in place. If you like what you saw and would like to see more, remember to like, subscribe, follow, comment, all of those things. The buttons are generally good. So press them. So again, hope you had a good time, and I will see you tomorrow.